Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Every Horror Film Where Horror is Forever. And today we have made it to the final stop of the Freddy Krueger A Nightmare on Elm Street franchise. We are talking A Nightmare on Elm Street, the 2010 remake produced by Platinum Dunes. Man, I got to tell you, I was very, very interested in watching this movie. As I said before in the earlier review, I had never seen this movie before. I had only heard bad things about it, pretty much. So I tried to keep that out of my mind. I tried to go into this with an open mind and watch it for what it was. And I have some opinions on that. Jeff, what's going on, man?
Man, first of all, I want to say we made it. We made it. In case you're wondering why we're not doing Freddy versus Jason, we're gonna wait until we do the Friday the 13th franchise so we can come at it with a fair viewpoint. Clash of two Titans. We can't just be on one Titan side. So we're gonna do Friday the 13th franchise before we do Freddy versus Jason. So for the purpose of this review and the franchise as a whole, just pretend Freddy versus Jason doesn't exist at this time. But yeah, man, here we are in 2010. This was probably my fifth time seeing it,
Mm.
which should tell you something because I give movies three strikes if I hate them. So it's interesting that it was your first time seeing it. I thought for sure you must have come across this movie at least one point or another in the last 13 years. But yeah, I mean, unless you just live under a literal rock, you're not going to be able to avoid the discussions about the 2010 remake and all the hate that it receives. It seems almost like a bandwagon hate movie. But
Right.
hey, I'm more interested in your first impressions than my fifth impression. So tell me, were the people online lying? Were they telling the truth? Is this movie god awful?
To me, this movie is not god awful. It is it I feel like I've said this about a lot of movies in this franchise. It's not the best movie I've ever seen, but it's not the worst movie I've ever seen. In terms of remakes, it could be a lot worse. I had, like you said, and like I said, I've only heard negative things about this movie. I have never
Mm-hmm.
really heard anything positive, and for that reason, I kind of have avoided this movie because I figured, well, there's really no need. Eventually, I'll get to it.
Yeah.
And then once we started this channel, we went down this rabbit hole reviewing these movies. I said, okay, this is my chance to see this movie. And so, when this came out, I know the year before that we had the Friday the 13th remake come out as well. So this was kind of this. And then a couple years earlier, we had the Halloween remake by Rob Zombie. So this was kind of this couple year span where these big franchises, these big IPs were getting remade, and Friday the 13th had their chance because before this, we really hadn't had a standalone Nightmare on Elm Street movie since what, 94? Whenever
Yeah, New Nightmare.
New Nightmare. I mean, we had Freddy versus Jason, but that was kind of a one-off type deal.
Mm-hmm.
So listen, there are some things in this movie that I genuinely do like. There are. I think they try to do some new things, some different concepts. I don't necessarily love every idea. I don't love the execution of everything, but is this like the worst movie I've ever seen? God awful, get off my screen. No, it's not. For me at least. And I could definitely go back. This isn't one of the more rewatchable ones where if I'm like only got to pick a certain few, I'm going to go back and rewatch this one. But
Mm-hmm.
I would be willing to sit down and give this movie another watch or two at some point down the line and just take it for what it is. I mean, there was never a sequel made to this movie. It's been what, 13 years since this film's came out, so it's got no ties to anything. It's just a one-off film. So why not?
You know how refreshing it is to hear you have that opinion, man. I was, I like I said, if I read reviews for a movie before I see a movie, my first viewing is tainted. I'm like that. So, 13 years of being barraged by just negative review. This is awful. This is bottom of the barrel. This is the worst of the worst. How could they do this to my man Freddie? 13 years of that will get to you. So to hear you have a first impression that is not just like hopping on the bandwagon, it shows me two things. One, you're a free thinker, and two, you actually paid attention because this. You're right. This is not this. you could do a lot worse in terms of remakes. The 2000s and the early 2010s remakes were big. Remakes were coming back because we had finally kind of cycled through all the classic IPs, and now people were getting better cameras, better tech, wanted to do some CGI, wanted to get some quick cash grabs. You had Texas Chainsaw Massacre in 2003 with Jessica Biel, which I love, by the way, banger of a remake.
Me too.
Um, you had The Fog, which was not a banger of a remake. 2007, you had a Halloween, which we know about. Hot off that trail, bringing that slasher icon back and all the numbers it did. Platinum Dunes is like, oh, dude, buy up these IPs. Let's get them out there, dude. So Michael Bay's production studio got the rights to Jason, got the rights to Freddy. 2009, we got Friday the 13th as a remake, reimagining. 2010, we got Freddy. So, yeah, man, remakes are generally despised by general audiences. I think it's very, very incredibly rare to find a remake that surpasses the original. I mean, other than like The Fly, The Thing, and maybe It most recently, you're not going to find a remake that's better than the original. Some might come close, like Texas Chainsaw and Friday the 13th, but some might just end up like The Fog or Poltergeist and just fizzle out immediately. So
Yeah.
I don't think this is a fizzling one, but I think that people, it's easy to see someone in the boots of Michael. It's easy to see someone else in the boots of Jason and obviously Ghostface. This is the first time we've ever detached ourselves from Robert Englund, and I don't think people were ready for that. I think they thought they were ready for it, but I think 60% of the hate that this movie gets comes from people who just can't look past that. That's what I believe. Because this movie does have some highlights. It has a lot of duds. I mean, it is a victim of the 2009 writer's strike, make no mistake, but I think this movie is overhated for sure.
I agree, and you bring up a good point. Obviously, Robert Englund not in this film. He's played Freddy's played by Jackie Earl Haley, and we'll get into his performance in a little bit. But yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think a lot of people, and hey, everybody has their own opinion. That's fine. I mean, obviously, everybody loves Robert Englund. Um, I don't know many people that would say I hate Freddy as Robert or I hate Robert Englund as Freddy.
Never.
But I thought about this earlier. What about maybe it's different? I don't know. But what about a series like Batman or Superman or these superheroes where, especially Batman is a good example, where you've had so many films and almost all of them have been played by different actors, at least one or two films in the series. I mean, do you see people I maybe some people I can't watch this movie because it's not Christian Bale. I can't watch this because it's not Adam West. I can't watch it because it's not Ben Affleck. I don't know. What do you think about that? Is that something that
Batman and Spider-Man are the most famous examples of that scenario because people will grow up with something, they'll get attached to it. A fresh face will come along, take up the mantle, might even do a better job, and no one will give him the credit. It happened with Christian Bale transitioning from Keaton to Christian Bale. It happened with Affleck transitioning from Bale to Affleck. The cycle is real. And unlike Batman, Freddy's only ever had one actor. I mean, could you imagine if every movie up through 2005 had Adam West in it? I mean,
yeah.
no one would even give Christian Bale the time of day. Is Adam West deserving of it? You know what? Make that case somewhere else. But people are only attached to Freddy. They don't know any alternatives. The uncertain is scary to them, and the uncertain is naturally hateable to them. And you know what? It's a low hanging fruit. I have my very passionate feelings about Affleck as Batman, but when Robert Pattinson took over, fine. You know what? I'll give you a chance, and he nailed it. You know what? Go into it fairly. Don't let Mr. Mom taint you from letting Keaton be Batman. Don't let Twilight let Pattinson taint you from being. You get what I'm saying.
Correct.
But Freddie has never been replaced. Robert Englund has never been replaced. So to see someone else, this is only the second guy to ever don the finger glove. So you're either first or you're last. And by default, you're going to be last. Now, if Jackie Earl Haley had done 3 more movies, you might have, you might be able to go toe to toe here. But it's funny that you bring up the Batman thing because Jackie Earle Haley is in the same situation Jared Leto was when he took over Joker. I think the potential was there, and I think you got a phenomenal actor there. And all it comes down to is the script and the studio behind you. You're only as strong as the studio allows you to be. And that's why people discredit Jared Leto. That's why people discredit Jackie Earle Haley for being Freddy. They don't like these new faces, but also their one chance was squandered by some external force. So no,
Right.
I don't think Jackie Earle Haley is deserving of any criticisms other than his performance solely.
I agree. I agree 100%. And last thing I'll say before we get into the movie itself is, you know, kind of like you said there. I know a lot about the series. It's my first time watching it, so I try not to let anything taint my expectations. But I feel like most times when people say, "Oh my god, this is the worst movie I've ever seen," most times it's not, because
No.
usually the worst movies you've ever seen are never talked about
Nope.
because people forget them. And I don't know many. Hey, have you seen that movie? Oh, it's the worst movie ever. Everyone saw it, was like, yes, undisputed, that's the worst movie ever. No, the worst movie ever is probably some random movie sitting in a bin somewhere at Walmart for like $2 right now that nobody's ever seen. And
Yeah.
that's why it's the worst, because no one's ever seen it. But anyway, let's get into the movie itself. This starts out at the good old Springwood Diner, not the Craven. I was a little disappointed,
Mm.
but points off movie. You're already starting off bad.
Ah, you suck. It was the worst
You
movie ever.
suck. I knew I didn't like this movie. And we get this character named Dean, where he's sitting in this he's sitting in the diner. He's can tell he hadn't been sleeping. He's trying to get some more coffee, and the waitress, she just walks on past him. She's like, "You don't need any coffee. You haven't even paid for your first 5 coffees. You don't need any." And he's following her around, and you can tell he's in a dream, and we get a quick glimpse of Freddy's glove in this movie. And then we have these his friend, girlfriend, whatever she is, kind of come into the mix, and she's like, "Hey, like, let's talk. I heard you haven't been feeling well." And before we get into it, you can already tell by the lighting, the tinting, the color grading that they do with this film. What do you think of that? Is it too much of a, oh, you can definitely tell it's like the 2010s, like everything's trying to look so studio efficient, or it's not so much, grindhouse type of 80s 90s kind of feel, I guess.
Every every edgy movie and every dark movie that came out between 2007 and 2011 had what people refer to as the piss filter applied to it, which is like this dirty yellow, brown, grungy, needs a pressure wash filter because it really just adds the edgy atmosphere. And video games weren't immune to it too. I mean, look at Modern Warfare 2 from
Yes.
2009. It's just yellow and brown everywhere. So yeah, that was a trend back then. Now we have like bright, colorful, zany shit, but in this era, you had some very dirty, dingy coloring. One of the strong suits of this film, I think, is the cinematography. For me at least, I can't think of the director's name, but I know that he directed in the 2000s a bunch of Green Day music videos, and I think a couple of My Chemical Romance videos. He's like a music video director, so
You know
he's
what
got
else
a
he directed?
huh.
He directed Smells Like Teen Spirit.
No, he did not.
He did.
Wow. Okay. So
Yeah.
hey, you know what? I trust you. I trust you got an eye for stage lighting. I trust you got an eye for colors and color grading. Hey, I'm gonna give you a chance. The movie didn't look bad to me. I've seen a couple movies from 2009 era that look bad. This one didn't look too bad for me. I will say that it's one of the elephants in the room is this a remake like Halloween did, or is this a reimagining? Because the studio tried to double down on the idea that it's a reimagining, and it's their idea of their spin on the story, and that's why some elements of the story are so different. But it's a remake in the sense that there's so many just like shot for shot homage shots in this movie, just signaling back to Wes Craven's. Like, okay, this is more of a remake, so you have a kind of an identity crisis here. Is this a remake of the classic, or is this a new version of the classic? In which case, get rid of all that shit.
Mm-hmm.
But it never really it tries to play both sides and doesn't end up winning either one. But what I was relating that to is the my favorite part about the original is when it's a dream, the world is tinted blue. You know it's a dream because the alleyway is blue, the room is blue, the blue lighting. You it's synonymous with dreamscapes. So to see the lack of blue atmosphere in this movie is telling, but I'm not going to hold it against him.
Correct. So, this guy, he's sitting there, he's having a conversation with this girlfriend. He's trying to tell her he's having these dreams. And, you know, will somebody please believe these kids about these dreams? Okay.
For
Somebody,
once,
somebody please believe them, because this guy, he can't take it anymore. And he's having this conversation, and then he gets up, and I got to be honest, I was kind of shocked at the opening brutality of this movie, because he has a scene where he grabs this knife, but really it's Freddy that's behind him, and Freddy's kind of controlling it. But in real life, it looks like he's got a knife to his throat, like he's gonna, cut himself. And eventually he does, and he gets it in there and he jabs it, and it's just oh, that's intense. It kind of got my attention. I was like, oh wow, that was an intense kill, and it kind of got me into it. And then boom, title card hits, and they play the theme music, and hey, A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010. Let's get it
yeah,
cracking.
yeah, you're opening up pretty strong. You got my attention. Immediately, I feel that this is a serial killer aesthetic and not a goofy, campy power glove aesthetic. So hey, let's do this thing, right? So we get into it, and right away you could tell that that's different. They didn't have that scene in the original, so you're like, oh, okay, we're in for a different take here. We don't know what's coming, so boom, title card hits, like you said. The classic theme song, which by the way, the score was pretty underwhelming in this movie. Let's just get that out the way. Other than the classic theme song, which we all love, Steve Jablonsky, who is like Michael Bay's go-to uh, score composer. Steve
Yeah.
Jablonsky did this. He did Friday Night Lights. I'm not Friday Night Lights. He did Friday the 13th, and he did Transformers. So he's
Yeah.
very maximalist, over the top production, which I like.
Yeah.
But you're lacking the magic fingers of the keys in the dreamscape. So I don't know.
Correct. So after that, this Dean kid, he's dead. We automatically go to a funeral, and we kind of get introduced to some of the characters there, and we see, we've got Dean, who obviously is dead. We've got his girlfriend Chris. We've got Nancy, who is a, a somewhat of a reimagining of the Nancy character from the original film. And then we've got this other guy, Jesse. He's there, and we get this interesting scene where Chris is sitting there at the funeral, and she sees this girl, and it's this little girl. And we think, oh, that's like one of Freddy's hallmarks. The little girl is playing jump rope and stuff, but we notice she's got like this claw mark kind of right there on her, and that's the idea they kind of play with, is that this Chris girl realizes that at this funeral, there's these pictures, and according to the story and what we know, these kids only met really in high school or a little bit before high school, but yet they've got pictures of each other when they were little kids, and that's kind of interesting. It's something you might not pick up on right away, but apparently before they knew each other, they knew each other.
Yeah, it's that's one of the elements of the story that it adds to the mythos that I like, is the idea of repressed memories from childhood. Not far fetched to believe that. I mean, I still remember some kids' names from my kindergarten class. I remember some kids' names from my first grade class, but I never really had parents go out of the way to repress them. I never had pictures hidden in a hidden drawer somewhere. So yeah, it's not far fetched to believe that hiding pictures and never talking about it would repress those memories. Because hey, 5-year-olds remember about 4 things in their life long term. So yeah, man, that's one of those things. Hey, did you get a point for originality here? I like the repressed childhood memories idea. You have a bit of a mystery aspect to it. We as the audience know what's going on. Let's see the journey to unravel it in their eyes.
Absolutely. So after that happens, Chris, she goes home, and her mom, she's a flight attendant, she's got to go to work, and so she's at the house. So they get into this stuff really quickly. In the beginning of the original film, they don't take a long time to get into the story, but they take a little bit of time kind of trying to get you introduced to the characters. This film, I mean, they get right to it. Someone dies from a dream, and they are on a roll. They're like, this guy Freddy is here. And So she goes back home, and her ex-boyfriend or whatever comes over, and he's trying to help her out. She's going through a tough time with everything that happened. And we get this recreation of the iconic kill that happens in the first film, where Tina, the girl's name, where she rises up in the air and she's doing the 360 around the bedroom and she's getting killed. And this is where I had my first issue with the movie itself. And if I'm skipping scenes, please interrupt me, because I've only seen this movie one time and I'm trying to make sure I get it all on track.
Yeah, no, we're on track.
So this is where I have the first problem. Is I don't necessarily have a problem with you redoing the kill, but the kill was not done better than the original. It's very mild and kind of boring. She just kind of rises up in the air. She like hits the walls and then just scratch, and then she falls on the bed, and that's kind of it.
Yeah, exactly. That was pretty damn good, like stunt work 40 years ago in the 80s. Like that kind of wire work and stunt double work and camera work rolling on film, that was impressive back then. We're in a decade now where we're about 3 Saw movies in. Okay, I'm
Yeah.
pretty sure Human Centipede exists at this point. Like, you got to step it up a little bit, man. Like, banging against a wall is effective in the 80s. It's effective in an homage. It was effective in New Nightmare because it was not only an homage, but it was like in universe taunting the main character. Here, come on.
Yeah.
The strongest aspect of Nightmare on Elm Street is how creative Wes got with the kills, something we'd never seen before. You had a chance to play around, man. Give us 3 or 4 really good original concepts for kills, and you would have had a banger rather than just a recreation of something that was 20 years more amateur.
Yep. I agree. It didn't add to it, and it just was recreating a kill for the fact of recreating a
Yeah.
kill, and it kind of lost me there. So she dies, and as you know from the original, everyone blames the boyfriend that's there at the time, except this time he runs. He runs out. Well, they did that in the original. He runs away, except this time he runs to Nancy's house, and he's like, he just shows up at her door, or excuse me, at her window, and it's like covered in blood. He's like, I didn't do it. I didn't do it. She's like, what the hell are you talking about? You just showed up at my window with blood all over you. What you did it.
Yeah, it's the characters aren't really fleshed out in this. The acting is okay for 2009.
Yeah.
Some of the actors in this I like a lot. Thomas Dekker, the kid covered in blood, I like him a lot. He played John Connor in the Terminator TV show, and I really took a liking to him, and I think that's why he got this role. Jackie Earle Haley, obviously, I like a lot. Connie Britton, I love Connie Britton. So the actors. Hey, for the budget you had fine actors. Okay, Rooney Mara, Oscar-worthy actress, obviously, even though she kind of phoned it in here. You got some good actors here, but I think the script was just weak. I think the script was weak, and that's because of a lot of rewrites. Thomas Dekker, Jesse, he gets in the bedroom and he's like, "I didn't do it. I didn't do it. This is what I'm trying to tell you." And he's clearly worked up and he's looking really good. The conversation is kind of a blur, but dude, within 30 seconds, and this is how weak and thin the plot is, or weak and thin the dialogue is. Within 30 seconds of him coming in the window, Nancy is singing the Freddy lullaby. So, not really a believable exchange there when your friend hops in your window covered in blood saying that your other friend is dead. Not really a realistic exchange there. Not the time to start singing the Freddy theme song. Wait till Act Two with that. That's kind of weak in my perspective, but
Yeah.
you know,
And that's kind of like I said a little bit ago, is that they don't really waste a lot of time,
no,
which I guess could be seen as a benefit to some people, because I maybe a lot of people are like, it's kind of like the thing with I'm bringing up Batman a lot in this movie. I don't know
we
why.
love Batman.
But exactly, we love Batman. In every Batman like remake, or it's a new version of Batman, everyone's like, we don't need to see his parents getting killed. Everyone knows the story, okay? We don't need to see it.
Yep.
Maybe in this film, they were like, hey, everyone knows Freddy's origin. Everybody knows who he is. We don't need to spend this an hour of the movie kind of explaining who Freddy is, and which I mean they do, but it's not like, okay, we kind of already know what he's about, which I kind of like, but they kind of jump into it too quickly in a way where it's not really like fleshed out enough.
Yeah.
These kids are like, oh, it's Freddy. I know it's Freddy. He's here. He's gonna kill us. It's like they're very smart to what's going on, I guess.
Yeah, they kind of get right on the case, whereas Nancy in the original movie kind of took like 30 minutes to even get a name. So, but in the opening, what, 20 minutes, you're already singing the song. So, yeah, that's another example of the screenwriters in the studio playing tug of war mentally.
Yeah.
Do we appeal to the returning fans and just do homages in a remake? Or do we gain new audiences with a fresh story and a completely original idea and potentially piss off the senior fans? They never mesh the two ideas well. They try to play both sides and they're weak on both sides. So like what you said would be appealing to returning fans, being like, we already know this. Let's get to it. You
Correct.
know, maybe Freddy's a senior killer at this point and they're trying to hunt him down and all the kids know the urban legend about Freddy Krueger, like, oh, gets to sleep or Freddy Krueger's going to come get you in your dreams. Like, I think that'd be cool. But here we are retreading the killing of Batman's parents, per se, of discovering Freddy Krueger, discovering what happened. So the movie needs to make up its mind of whether it's a remake or a reimagining, and it needs to do it fast because right now it hasn't done it.
Correct. And also, I think it was the scene before where Jesse shows up, which is funny because Jesse from the second film is never heard of again, but in this film we have a new Jesse.
Oh
And
yeah,
it makes me wish that it was, in my head it's Jesse from the
that'd be
second film.
cool. That'd be cool if Will Patton was like a cameo as a teacher or something.
So, you know, I don't know if this happened before, but it happened somewhere in this where they do a recreation of the wall scene where Freddy's coming out of the wall, and good God,
They dropped the
CGI
ball on that.
CGI on that spot, horrible choice. When you have a film that came out in 1984 that made a practical effect using like a bed sheet or whatever, and someone like styrofoam wall or whatever coming out of that, and you use CGI to recreate that scene, and it looks awful. That was like, again, you're recreating stuff for the fact of recreating it, but it's not done better than the original.
Exactly. You're not improving upon a formula. You're only ripping it off because, oh, remember this? Yeah, man. The original scene, I said that's a iconic moment. One of my favorite Freddy moments is the wall. And they made that with, I think, spandex, like
Yeah.
Under Armour material or something like that.
Mhm.
Completely practical. Practical will always look better, man, even 4 decades later. So yeah, to have the 7 second CGI cutscene from like a PS3 game is just so it didn't need it, man. It didn't do anything for me. I know you were expecting like oh, that's a cool Easter egg, ha ha ha. In case anyone in this theater hadn't seen the original, that was from the original. The fuck is the point, man? Just cut it out or do it better.
I agree. So that's another one of the areas where they messed up a little bit. And before we go, a little bit further in the plot, like you mentioned, there actually is some really good talent in this movie in terms of
Mhm.
acting, of what these actors have gone on to do. Mentioned Rooney Mara, which I didn't even know until I looked it up, that's Joaquin Phoenix's wife or his partner or whatever.
Yeah, yeah.
I didn't know that. The kid that plays Quentin, I can't remember his name. I have to look it up. He's been in a lot of stuff. He was in Smile that we reviewed
Oh
earlier
yeah, he
this
was a
year.
cop, Kyle
Yeah,
Garner.
correct. He was, you mentioned Connie Britton. I mean, they got some
Yeah.
really good talent in this movie, and it's a shame that you have a movie with this level of ability and everything. Not all the actors are bad, but for the most part, it's not up to par with what the talent and the ability they have. Granted, is that a writing thing or is that a studio thing? I know Rooney Mara pretty much admitted that like she almost was like, yeah, I don't want to do this movie. And this movie almost made me quit acting, which is strange, but everybody's got to get their start somewhere. But for the most
Mhm.
part, a lot of people seem like they kind of just, I'm not going to say phoned it in, but it wasn't the best performance they could have gave.
Yeah, and you have to wonder about studio interference. I mean, it's like the Jared Leto Joker thing. I believe an actor can fully commit to a role and like dedicate his life to it and really give the best that he can. All that matters is how much it's chopped up on the cutting room floor.
Pretty much. Pretty much. So at this point in the movie, we talked about Jesse being in there. He's talking about this. He runs outside and he gets arrested by the cops. The cops put him in the slammer. And at this point, earlier in the movie when they were at the funeral, Nancy was talking to Chris and was like, I know the dreams you're having. I know what you're talking about. Like I said, they're very aware of what's going on. But Jesse's like, no, you don't know what you're talking about. She blah, 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 whatever. Go get some sleep. Why don't you? Go get some sleep. That's what you need. Some good old sleep.
Some good old shut eye.
That's gonna help you. So he gets apprehended by the police and he goes to jail. It's kind of this is kind of where we start to get, we've seen Freddy a couple times, but this is when he kills Jesse. This is when we really start to get to Freddy. So we'll use this point here to talk about him. Give me your take on Freddy in this movie. Give me everything. Tell me about the performance. Tell me about the look. Tell me about the mannerisms. Give me your overall synopsis of Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy in this movie.
Yeah, I mean, that is the biggest elephant in the room. I think Platinum Dunes, I think their first priority when making this movie was finding the Freddy. And you got to think about what's going on at the time. There's a lot of actors that are, popping off in the 2009. Sam Worthington was having his explosion on the scene. I could have seen them choosing him, but they went with Jackie Earle Haley, which really hadn't done anything other than the prior year's Watchmen, where he was Rorschach. And have you ever seen Watchmen?
I haven't, but I've heard his performance, and that's really good.
Phenomenal, very good, and very just. I completely understand why they gave him Freddy Krueger. His performance as Freddy Krueger was very similar to Rorschach. Not a lot of range difference there, but Jackie Earle Haley had a very big glove to fill. I liked him. I liked what he brought to the table. I liked his voice. I liked his delivery. I liked his body movements. I think he went home and he practiced every night, man. I think he really put some passion into it, and I feel it. Jackie Earle Haley has a very menacing voice, very menacing delivery. Um, Honestly, I think it'd be more fun to do an impression of his Freddy than Robert Englund's Freddy. Voice wise, I think his voice is very memorable and very haunting. And some of the lines he delivers are great, even the ones that are kind of campy for nostalgia's sake. He has a very good delivery and he has a very good persona about him. He's very scary. He is a very scary Freddy. Now, as far as the physical appearance of Freddy, he looks noticeably different. He looks almost inhuman. Robert Englund looked like a pizza face, but Jackie Earle Haley looks like, I've seen him compared to a cat, a camel, weird shit, man. Like the prosthetics of his nose, the bridge of his nose and the lip area, it looks very and Jackie Earle Haley's got a very unique shaped face, as to begin with. And I could tell that they didn't want to just go with like paint on the face. They didn't want it to look like Jackie Earle Haley. They wanted it to look like a burnt corpse or whatever. But the face was a little off-putting in some scenes, especially the way Jackie Earle was talking. He talks through his teeth a lot like this, and he doesn't move his lips a lot, which means that the caked on makeup on his lips don't move with his lips. So his lips end up doing this number right here where they don't move at all and only his teeth do. Mm-hmm. Very hard. I don't think there's a shot where his lips actually touch unless he's like yelling or really enunciating. So that was a little distracting to me. Other than that, his performance is fantastic. It's not Robert Englund, obviously, but you'd be stupid to hold it against him. I think Jackie Earle Haley did a bang up job as Freddy, as human Freddy, as Menace Freddy. I liked it a lot. Other than the facial design, I liked it a lot.
I gotta agree with you. I mean, it's so hard to, imagine someone else other than Robert Englund, doing the role. So I understand why people might not be a fan. But if you put that aside and just focus on what's being presented to you, I think he did a really good job. In some aspects, I do like the voice that he does. In some aspects, again, Mentioning Batman, he does sound like Batman sometimes. He's like, "Look at me."
Yeah,
He
very
kind of
deep.
does
Yeah.
that, which sometimes I like, sometimes not as much. Um, the the mannerisms he did this thing a couple times in the movie. I don't know if you caught it or not. As a matter of fact, let me
Look at that.
let me use this for an example. He does this thing where he like has the top two claws and he kind of like, I can't do it completely with this, but he kind of like
Like,
scissors them together like that.
mm-hmm.
And I really like that because that was like him like getting excited to like get after and like kill somebody or do something. He kind of did that little thing there.
Little
That
tick,
was
like a
great.
dog wagging its tail. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Exactly. In the noise of the two blades kind of hitting against each other. I like that. As far as the makeup, part of me, I'll be honest, part of me wanted to go in like hating it, saying this is the worst makeup I've ever seen. But I also liked it in some aspects. I haven't really made up my mind yet. Like it's not the worst thing I've ever seen. It's certainly a lot different than what we have seen.
Mm-hmm.
But in some aspects, it looks really good. Sometimes it looks really bad. But I don't know. I haven't really made up my mind, but I'm okay with the way it looked. I mean, it's very jarring and different from what we have seen, but I in some aspects I did like it. And then we after that we pretty much have the traditional green and red sweater and the fedora. Um, but I think Jack. I mean, if your problem in this movie is Jackie Earl Haley, you either are just hating it because it's not Robert Englund, or you're watching another movie because I
Yep.
think he's by far probably the best part of this movie.
Oh yeah, he is the best part of this movie, and people hate him the most because he's not Robert England. It's so unfair.
So
But the voice, I really want to hone in on the voice because I like the voice. Now, Jackie Earl Haley has a very deep voice naturally. We're used to Robert England, like when he tries to sound like growling and menacing, his voice goes up a couple octaves, you know,
yeah,
and it also could be audio equipment from the time. But Jackie Earl Haley, that voice, I could see that in my nightmares. That's a very scary voice. Like
yeah,
one of my favorite moments from this movie. I don't think we got to it yet, but it was when Nancy was dreaming and she went outside to her backyard. She found her dog slashed up. Um, and Freddie pops out from behind the wall and he goes, I was just petting him. And he laughs. That's, whew, I like that delivery. I actually rewound that and watched it again. I was like, oh, I like that delivery a lot. And I was just petting it. Like, very, like,
yeah.
I can't explain it. Kind of suave, like very smooth, very buttery. Like he a lot of confidence in that deep, deep voice of his. So he didn't phone it up. He was just talking like a menacing grin. He was talking through his teeth the whole time. And I like that delivery a lot, as well as some other lines. But his voice, I think, is his strongest aspect in this movie.
I agree. It's definitely a different take on the Freddy character, and he's very scary.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever you think scary is. Some people love the comedic Freddy; that's their favorite. Some people, like me, they like the darker side of Freddy. I'll get into it in a little bit what I think about, because to me, this is without a doubt, the darkest version of
Oh
Freddy
yeah.
you will ever see. I don't think you'll ever see anything this. Maybe when a new movie comes out, but as of now, definitely the darkest, and we'll explain why here shortly. But kind of going on with the movie here, you know, he kills Jesse, and I like this scene because he's in this dream and he's in the boiler room, but he's got the dead bodies of the people he's already killed like kind of hung up, and he's like making him look at it. I don't know, I just thought that was like kind of scary, kind of menacing. I like that if Freddy was like, oh, you don't believe, like, look what I've already done to these people, I'm gonna do it to
Mm-hmm.
you. um he dies, he gets killed, he gets stabbed, up through the gut. Not the most creative kills. The kills in this movie really aren't all that great. um but yeah, I mean, I just I like some aspects, I don't like some aspects, but nonetheless, he dies in prison, and the other cellmates like freaking the hell out. He's like, "Oh, they're gonna think I did this."
Yeah. Yeah. Now, when he dies, it cuts back to Freddy having Jesse hung up by his feet. and he delivers one of the most popular lines from the movie. I think everyone unanimously goes, "Oh boy, I hated this movie," but this one moment was really dope. It was the monologue that Freddie gave, where he was like, "Did you know that when the heart stops beating, the brain is still active for 7 minutes? We got 6 more minutes to play."
Yeah, that
I
was
like that.
I'm glad you brought that up. That was a pretty good line, and that just shows you, Jackie Earl Haley's perspective on it, where Robert Englund might have, if he said that, it might have been a little bit more comedic and a little bit more over the top. This was very like deadpan, like in the voice.
And then Jesse's reaction, that blood curdling scream that he did,
Yep.
like it made you dread for Jesse. Like, holy shit! Like these next 6 minutes are going to be the worst of your life, buddy. I'm sorry. Like you actually got that feeling. So, hey, that's a 9 out of 10 line for me, man. I like that idea. That's another one of those concepts. That's another one of those concepts that they added to the mythos in this movie that I think they could have dwelled upon more. What if Freddy was out to get that 6 minutes from each soul? And what if he was like, that was like his high and he was chasing a high? He had to kill them in the real world to get 6 minutes of playtime. Like, that's really cool. I like that idea. I like science-based ideas added to the mythos. It's not the last one they're gonna do in this movie, but I thought that was dope. I really did.
Absolutely, I agree. And then Nancy and Quentin, they kind of start to, you know, figure things out and say, no, like there's more to this and what's going on. And eventually this is where we kind of figure out, which we were introduced to earlier, that all these kids, including more of them, they all went to preschool together, but they don't really remember it. They see a picture. Nancy goes up, she finds a picture at her mom's house that she had hidden away, and we find out all these kids were together at one point as preschoolers, but they don't remember. And eventually, they get it out of Nancy's mom as to why that is. And they all went to this preschool together, and Freddie used to be a gardener. And at this point, this is where I am. I'm really split between what they did with Freddie here. In the original Nightmare, Freddy is a child killer. Originally, he was supposed to be a child. You know what I'm talking about. In
Mm-hmm.
this movie, and I didn't say that word because YouTube will like flag your videos for stuff like that. But you understand what I'm saying. In this movie, they go that direction and they go there all the way. And parts of me are like, man, like this is dark, this is twisted. Like they're really going for this. Like they're really trying to make Freddy like a sick dude, like you want to hate him. But at the same time, it's like, man, I'm not gonna say you went too far, but I don't know if it was the right direction. I don't. I felt really uncomfortable during certain scenes of this movie because of that. But what are your thoughts on that? Did they do the right thing by going that direction? Did they take it too far? I mean, what was the
I think although the word murderer was used in the 80s, I think the actual crime was always implied. I just think they weren't allowed to say it in the
correct?
80s. So for them to say it now, obviously standards have changed, standards and practices a little more lenient on rated R movies. You can get away with that. You can get away with a lot worse. So it kind of took a little bit of the nuance away from the original of, well, maybe there was like some sexual undertones here,
Mm-hmm.
which weren't really like, they didn't hit you over the head. Other than the glove coming between Nancy's leg, they didn't hit you over the head with sexual undertones in the original.
Correct.
In this movie, it's very on the nose. It's very like, it's not blink and you'll miss it. There's nothing to theorize on. I mean, they tell you point blank that's these type of crimes. So um we I'd like a little bit more subtlety, you know. But on the flip side, we're starting to get into the discussion area of the biggest mistake that this movie makes, in my opinion. And I'll drop it right now. The biggest mistake that this movie makes is teasing this idea of a plot where Freddy Krueger was falsely accused. They for 2x of this movie, it is heavily implied that Freddy Krueger was mistakenly or falsely accused of doing these horrible things to these kids, and the parents killed him wrongfully, and now he's out getting revenge. That is something that I talked about when we reviewed the first one. I said it's almost Freddy is almost sympathetic because what if he's just out for revenge? What if he was done wrong? Something along those lines in the original review of the first movie. I said, if you have Freddy as a sympathetic character who was done wrong by these parents, totally different ballgame.
Correct.
This movie teases you with that. I think they played with that idea in one of their scripts. But ultimately they jerked the rug out from underneath that, and Freddy was guilty of the crimes that he was said he was. And the parents were in the right for doing what they did. Absolutely. But man, a falsely accused man like that, wrongfully killed by the parents of said victims that weren't actually victims, out to hunt for revenge, that's a cool Freddy. I'd like to see that Freddy movie. I almost got that Freddy movie, and then I didn't. So that's my number one complaint with this movie is the tease of that alternate reimagined story where he's an innocent man getting revenge, a la Joker or whatever. I think you I think you shouldn't have even teased me with that because now I want that, and now the ending sucks even more. So that is my biggest gripe with the remake of 2010 is you had this potential for a very original storyline, and you were too afraid. You just rode the fence too hard.
I agree 100% with everything you just said. That's also my biggest gripe with the movie is that it's it's tough to make a horror villain sympathetic in the way that you're supposed to root for them because at the same time you're supposed to hate the villain.
Mm-hmm.
It kind of depends, but I think you're right. I think that if they really wanted to make their stamp and make their trademark on this movie, they should have just went full on, hey, he's actually innocent,
Yeah.
and just done a completely different take on it, and he's coming back for revenge on these people. I mean, yes, that does take you in the aspect of you're kind of rooting for the villain, but you're
Yeah.
not really supposed to do. But at the same time, it would have been a cool concept, but at the same time, I do see why people don't want a sympathetic Freddy. Um, but it's certainly a concept I think they should have went with to just make it different and be like, oh, you talk about these movies over here. Well, in this one, he's actually innocent. He didn't do it, and he's actually coming back for revenge. That could have been a really cool way to go about things.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and that's just another example of, hey, you're either a remake or a reimagining. You need to figure this shit out early in the game and
Correct.
embrace it because right now you're not doubling down on any identity.
True, very true, and that's probably one of the biggest problems of the movie. So,
Mm-hmm.
we have this happen here. They start to figure out that obviously Freddy did what he did, um, and throughout parts of the movie, we one of the things I do like about this movie that actually better than any of the other movies in the franchise is they introduce the aspect of I think they're called micro naps.
Yes. Yeah, micro naps. Yeah, it's a new concept.
Mhm.
It was touched upon in the 80s like daydreaming or just having hallucinations, but they that was another one of those science-based terms that they introduced to the mythos here that or check it out. You can Google it, and sure enough, insomnia and sickness and all that. The science-based route, the scientific explanations for Freddy. I like that. I'm a big fan of that.
I do. I like it as well because there are certain aspects in this movie where, someone could be walking around doing something in a scene and they see something and they're like, oh, it's just because you've been up for so long. And it's hard to tell between are they seeing Freddy? Are they in a dream or have they been up for so long? And I like that idea because if anybody that's ever, been up for 24 hours with no sleep, let me tell you, it can get scary. And I don't mean it in a Nightmare on Elm Street scary, but when I went to Italy this year and I stayed up and I jumped through like different time zones and I stayed up for like 28 hours and no sleep because
Oof.
I can't sleep on planes. Let me tell you, when I got to Italy and everybody was like, "Oh, we're all here, like we're all excited." We had like 20 people with us. I'm like, I could give a fuck. I want to go to sleep right now. And I tell you what, that was the best like 2 hour nap I took in my life. And when I woke up, I was still tired. I mean, but the effects of being up that long are scary, and that's why I like this series so much is because of that. And I just thought that was a cool concept they introduced. It's
Mhm.
small, but I like it.
Yeah, it is small, but it is science based and it makes it feel more real. Another aspect related to that is the idea that once you stay up past the 72-hour mark, once you go to sleep, you're going into a coma.
Yep,
Um, I don't remember if that was touched on in one of the originals, but dude, that's an awesome motive. You know what I mean? Like, even Freddie mentions that. He's like, I just had to keep, like, in the end, when he's got Nancy, he's like, I just had to keep you up long enough so that when you fell asleep, you'd stay asleep, you know? So horrifying. So, yeah, that, the epinephrine, the, everything like that, man. I love it. I think I think all the science-based explanations for why Freddy is a realistic threat in the information age that we're in, where things are less scary than they were in the 80s. You nailed it, man. One of those scripts that had all those ideas, you nailed it.
absolutely. And to kind of continue with what I was saying a little bit earlier about all the kids being found out, and they all Nancy goes on the classic research montage of looking stuff
Mhm.
up. And this right here is honestly probably my least favorite scene in the movie. She finds this website of this guy who's been documenting the same things. I'm making these. He's making these videos. I'm going through these dreams. I've been up. I can't sleep. Okay, that's fine. I get it. I like that. And then we get to the last video,
Oh,
and this
dude.
guy, he's sitting there, and he's like, I just haven't been able to sleep. And he just like falls asleep, and all of a sudden he just smacks his head like against the camera, and somehow that video got uploaded to the internet.
I
And
like, dude, I like to imagine that Freddy's there. He's like, okay, export video, upload. No, this video is not made for kids.
oh my
Add
god,
thumbnail. All right, and upload. Thanks. All right, bye.
thanks. All right, bye. I that I hated that scene. It was
Yeah,
so bad.
that should have been cut. Yeah.
I like the guy documenting it. I think that's cool, but it would have been better if he just like fell asleep on camera and the video just ended.
Yeah.
But when he smacks his head against the camera, it's like, okay,
Yeah. It's like, who's uploading this, dude?
exactly. Really bad.
Yeah.
But other than that, once they do this, Quentin's his dad or whatever is like a principal with a guidance. I don't know. He works at the high school, and they start to confront him, and that's where they kind of tease, "Oh, the Freddy, is he innocent?" And I while I like the angle of that they could have went with that, I don't like how Quentin just he's like, he's innocent. I knew it. I'm like, how do you know? Like, what? He's like, we were 5 years old, but you don't even know what you're saying. I'm like, you're just like discrediting yourself for no reason. I kind of found that kind of jarring.
Yeah, it was kind of like they skipped a scene or two in the editing process, that maybe some deleted scenes where they're just like theorizing where, well, maybe, we don't remember this, we definitely skipped some kind of thought process there. And he got a little too defensive on one side of that argument there. But yeah, I didn't believe that for a second. Even though that's what I wanted that storyline. I feel like we missed something there. There's a gap in that logic.
Yeah, so that was interesting. He's like, you had no evidence, and I'd be like, dude, what?
It's like, neither do you.
Neither do you. You don't remember. You don't remember anything. You just learned about this like 5 minutes ago. And so they kind of figure out that you know let's go back to the preschool where this happened. Like we need to go back and just kind of retrace our steps, and maybe we can remember more. And so they go through this. They go back to the preschool, which I don't know about you, man, but while I do like this scene because I think it's kind of interesting and it adds to the lore. Um, if there was a place where bad things happened and that building had been there for a while, and I could go to that building and find evidence still there that tells me that the police did not give a shit about this, or I don't know. I just kind of find it hard to believe all this stuff is just that's like if you walked into Myers' house like 40 years later, you just found Michael's knife in his mask. Like, oh, I knew it was him.
It's felt like his sister's corpse, and then you're like, oh, wait a second.
So
Yeah.
I knew it. I don't
I
know.
mean,
I just found that kind of weird. Like I like the scene, but it's just like, man, they just never. No one ever thought to check this place, like ever.
it brings up more questions than it answers. Like, hey, these kids are in high school, man. They're like 17, and you're talking about something that happened in preschool. So you're talking about 13 years. This building's been abandoned, and nobody has found any evidence in this building. Nobody. Come on.
Yeah.
Why is this building sitting here for 13 years? Who's paying for the utilities? Who's paying to keep that lawn mowed? You know, it is stupid. It's not well thought out. You know, this franchise is not a stranger to keeping a house around longer than it's necessary. You know what I mean? And thank God the house is not a big aspect of this movie. But yeah, do something with that preschool, huh?
Yeah. I don't know. I just thought that was weird. And something else I wanted to mention, we kind of gloss over because it's a very quick scene. But again, they try to do a recreation of the bathtub scene, an iconic scene. But in this movie, there's no it's not subtle, and when it happens it's very quick, and it never happens again. In the first one it happens like a couple times to kind of get your tension building. Freddy's claw comes up, she wakes up, he pulls back, he does it again, he pulls her under. This time like it kind of just happens, and then like she just gets out of the tub, and then she goes to a dream sequence. I don't know, I just again, the sake of just saying that you did that scene but not doing it better than the original.
Yeah, I mean, it's just an Easter egg for the ones who have been here since the original. It's just a tongue in cheek. Oh, remember this happened? You know, it's funny because that the Tina death ceiling thing, a couple other aspects in this movie that are just ripped, like the body bag floating down the hallway. A couple of those things are just ripped straight out of the pages of the original. It's supposed to be an homage, but dude, could you imagine if a sports team copied their plays from 40 years ago? Could you imagine if a pop star only used dance moves from 40 years ago? There's
Right.
no growth, and it feels out of place. It feels shoved in there. I mean, you could have made your own glove in the bathtub iconic moment. You could have had that. It could have rivaled that. But instead you played it safe and you pulled this 80s move, like this, like your dad busting out a guitar at your party to play Freebird, man. It's just it doesn't fit. It doesn't fit in the context of the story, man. And you should have just stop trying to remake the original if that's not what you're trying to do.
Absolutely. So, and then either before the preschool thing or after, I can't remember. Somewhere between this, they have the scene where they Quentin's like taking these sleeping pills, which the whoever did the special effects with the makeup did a really good job, because these dudes look like they haven't slept in years. They look like they're on lots of drugs, and they did a good job. And I love the scene where they pull up to the pharmacy or whatever,
Mm-hmm.
and he's in line. He's like, "I need you to fill these up," and the guy's like, "No." He's like,
And
"Okay."
Kyle Gallner's like, "Ugh." He
He's
walks
like, God.
away.
He's like, I expect them to fully like have that crackhead freak out scene that's in like any movie
Yeah.
about drugs, where they show up to the pharmacy and they're like, "Oh, give me drugs." He's like, "Fill them up." He's like, "No." He's like,
Okay. And
he
he
just
walks
walks off.
away.
He just
That
walks
is,
off.
yeah, I did like that. I'm glad you reminded me of the pharmacy scene because I wanted to point something out. My absolute number one favorite shot of the whole movie happens in the pharmacy. It's the scene where she's on the ground in the aisle, and the camera is framed so it's looking down the aisle of products, and it's flashing in between. The aisles are turning into boiler pipes, and Freddy's appearing in front of an orange light at the end of the aisle, but it's actually a hallway of the boiler room, and it transitions seamlessly between aisles of a supermarket that's bright and well lit and safe into this dark and really threatening boiler room presence.
Mhm.
That transition, I went back and I watched it on YouTube. I like that one a lot. That's probably the highlight of cinematography from this movie for me. I really, really, really like that scene. And who else could do that but a music video director?
Very true. Yeah, definitely some cool scenes that they shot, and that scene is good because in that scene she's having this kind of fight with Freddy, and that's when she gets the big slash on her arm. And while doing that, I think it's after that or before that or sometime soon, the classic pull Freddy sweater, you bring
Mm-hmm.
it into the real world, and it's like at this point they kind of establish, hey, this is how we're gonna kill Freddy.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have liked to see him do something different. I
Like a
know
different way
it's
to kill him.
I know he's been killed in a bunch of different ways, so I know it's probably hard to come up with a really good idea of a way to kill Freddy. But to do the classic, we got to pull him into the real world and kill him. It's kind of like that's the best you could come up with. Like I don't know. I thought they maybe could have did something a little more creative. I understand that's how like it's supposed to go. You pull them into your world, you kill them, but I don't know.
Yeah, it's in the first movie. I mean, I didn't like the way Freddie Parrish in the original movie, which is Nancy's just like, no, I'm not scared of you. I
Right.
mean, I'm glad I didn't do that. Well, what, stabbing a guy a couple of times, cutting his hand off? Dude survived burns. Dude survived how many years living in dreams? I don't think a couple flesh wounds are the way to go. Beheading, maybe. I mean,
Yeah.
chop his head off, maybe. Um, burn his corpse in the boiler room or something. Some man, but you could have done a little better than just stabbing him a couple times. And then what? He comes back at the end for the obligatory tease.
Exactly. Exactly. So we pretty much understand, hey, at this point, she's gonna go to sleep, she's gonna pull him in, and that's what they do. They get to this point, and they discover the preschool and they kind of figure out what happened. They figure out that Freddy really did commit these crimes, and it's really uncomfortable scene where, and I get it's supposed to make you uncomfortable, but it's just because of the subject matter. They find these pictures, and they're she's like, he was all Nancy was always his favorite. And he in some of these lines, man, the things he's really effective at it, really getting under your skin and making you feel gross and icky about the subject matter.
Yeah.
And he's got the pictures of like the things he did to the kids, and it's like, oh, it's a little unnerving to watch, to say the least.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a little more modern with the psychological horror aspect of it. I mean, doing something like that in the 80s would have got you an X rating, you know.
Yeah.
So yeah, I get it. Bold choice. I'll take it. Rightfully upsetting when he has Nancy in the bed in her schoolgirl dress, and it's very non-consensual allegory. It's very
Ah,
it's icky to watch, but he delivers some banger lines. He does the "I'm your boyfriend now." Um, the really frat boy line of "Your mouth says no, but your body says yes."
oh
Isn't that
yeah.
isn't that from another one? Isn't that from another Nightmare movie? Your mouth says no, but your body says yes.
It could be, not off the top of my head, but I feel like I've heard that from somewhere before.
It sounds like something that in one of the movies we just watched. It might have even been New Nightmare. I know I've heard it from another line. I have to look it
Yeah.
up. But anyways, he delivers some banger lines. She's going through the 1428 Elm house in her dream. You get the molasses stairs and now a molasses hallway where she can't run in her dreams. And Freddy delivers what would be a campy line in a very menacing way. He goes, "How's that for a wet dream?" Which I think is a line from another movie. And yeah, it's from the fucking the waterbed kill. How's that for a wet dream? It's from the waterbed kill from number
That's
5 or 4.
that's true.
Um, yeah, the sequence is good. Freddy is threatening. I'm glad we're back in the house for a purpose this time, and not a supernatural purpose. And I'm glad she's getting chased through the hallways of her dreams. Feels very real and reminiscent of the original.
You know what? I like the fact that they show the house, but it's not the house. It is the house, but it doesn't look like the house from the other films, which they have to throw in.
It's a reimagining of the house. Thank God.
Thank God there's no red door with the green shutters and all
I'm
this.
tired of seeing that popsicle
Tired
stick
of it.
looking house, man.
Tired of seeing
Yeah.
that house. So
Yeah.
I give them points for that. And so we kind of get to the final scene where, they're in this area. He's like, hey, I'm gonna go to bed and you're gonna stay here and wake me up, which we've seen that happen before. Usually doesn't work. She goes into sleep. She's in this battle with Freddy. They're trading off these lines, and that's when you mention, he's doing the whole, the really sadistic lines, and he's, you're always my favorite and all this stuff, and it's really good at getting under your skin. And I actually like this scene a lot. The very ending where he's like raising up the glove, he's getting ready to kind of stab her in the middle.
Mhm.
And when they were at the hospital earlier, what's his name? Quentin grabbed adrenaline. And I
Yep.
said, look, either you're Batman from the Batman Robert Pattinson, or you're just a crackhead. And just like in the Batman, sticks it with the adrenaline, and she wakes up and she brings Freddy. While I didn't love, the fact that they did the classic bring him in, I like the way that, stuck him with the adrenaline and she woke up and grabbed him. I thought that was kind of cool.
Yeah, a modern, more scientific approach to something that was scary back then wouldn't be scary now unless you added some kind of reality-based science behind it. So, yeah, epinephrine was another one of those science-based aspects of this plot that I like. So, yeah, good job. Quentin's got a rusty paper cutter blade, and
Yeah.
they're fighting, and and they're tussling around in the room, and Nancy gets the glove and she drops the line, "You're in my world now, bitch," which is not a reference to the original. It's not a reference to any of the sequels. It's a reference to fucking Freddy versus Jason. That's where he
Right.
said it. So I don't know. I get it, tongue in cheek. You know exactly who's in the audience here, but
Well,
uh,
I'd been waiting all movie for them to drop the word bitch because you knew it was going to
dude,
happen eventually.
he said fuck a couple times, but he didn't say bitch. But when I was hoping I was hoping I get it. Welcome to prime time, bitch. And I
Exactly.
love
I've
that.
been I've been waiting. I was like, man, it's going to happen eventually. I know it's coming. And
Yeah.
it's funny you bring that up because not only, did they kind of steal that line, they also kind of steal the way that Freddy dies because in Freddy versus Jason, he gets his head chopped off. In this, he doesn't really get it chopped off, but his neck kind of gets sliced a little bit. So I don't know.
Yeah.
Maybe they borrowed a little bit too much from Freddy versus Jason, but at the end of the
Final
day, it's not the worst. It's not the best.
end of the day, they played it safe more often than not. And that is the biggest disservice they did to themselves. I mean, they could have had a really you could have had a banger on your hands. You could have had a really grungy, like what Halloween did in 2018. You could have done it 8 years prior, man. But you played it safe. You played it safe.
They
And
played it safe.
you went for the 3D blood splatters that were all big at the time, and you didn't want to. I don't know, man. You played it
Exactly.
safe, and you didn't want to embrace the reimagining aspect of it because the studio wanted to make money off returning fans. So
Very true. And so they kill Freddy. They bring him into the real world. They burn him. They burn Freddy because he's never been burned before. And that's kind of it. And then we get this final last scene where, the parent, Connie Britton, takes Nancy home, and they're walking in the front door and they're talking. It's like, you're going to get some good sleep. And I'm like, oh no, this isn't going to end well. I know something's going to happen.
yeah, where's the drop top? Where is it?
Where is it? And of course, they do the scene where they're in front of the mirror. The mom like kind of leans over, she leans back, and it's Freddy. And he grabs her through the mirror, kind of like 3D looking, like kind of pokes her through the eyes and then
Very
drags her
3D.
through the
Yeah.
mirror. And a lot of people don't like that. I actually kind of thought it was kind of cool. I actually didn't have a problem.
It's better than the inflatable doll that we got in the 80s.
It is. It is.
Not much better, but it is better. But it's confusing because it's like, hey, his real world body died for real. Why is he still haunting the dreams? I don't understand. But
So yeah, is it a dream? Is it not? Is it PTSD? Blah blah blah, whatever. And that is the end of A Nightmare on Elm Street 2010, the remake. And just a quick backstory before we get into the rankings. This was contracted. This was supposed to be like a sequel. There's supposed to be sequels that were going to start another franchise to this. And it's weird because despite this movie being financially successful, really successful, they did not do a sequel to this. It was panned by everybody. Everyone seemed to hate it. Critics hated it, and I think they just were like, "Screw this. We're tired of getting bullied." So
Yeah.
they just never made another one, and that was it.
Yep, studios got cold feet. Happens all the time. Part of and this that is the reason we don't have another Freddy movie 14 years later. My understanding of it is that Kyle Gallner, Jackie Earl Haley, and Rooney Mara are still contracted to do the next two sequels. Whatever the next Freddy movie is, it has to also have them in it because the plan was to do a trilogy or whatever. And because they're not making it, it's kind of up in limbo until someone comes along and buys them out of their contract, which is
Really?
super expensive. I mean, you basically, without looking at the nitty gritty of it, my guess is that the studios would have to pay millions upon millions of dollars just to buy those actors out of the contract, and then also millions to buy the IP. And they just don't think they can make that kind of return in there. So no one has made a gamble on it. I'm sure the actors have talked about it. I don't know why the actors don't just forfeit their rights or why there isn't some kind of washout clause after a decade. I don't know. I don't know. But that's why it's been floating. Someone has to come along and drop a lot of money on it in order to even get it out of limbo. So it's going to be a while.
I am shocked it hasn't been Blumhouse because Blumhouse paid $400 million for the rights to The Exorcist.
Dude, it's going to be Blumhouse. I mean, Miramax just bought Halloween, so they're not shopping right now.
No.
It's going to be Blumhouse for sure. Dude, it might even be Jordan Peele. You know what I mean? Like, I would not be shocked if it was Blumhouse. Maybe a streaming service original. Maybe Apple has to come along and do it. Maybe Amazon has to come along and do it. But someone's got to drop hundreds of $1,000,000 just to get the rights, let alone make the movie. So it's going to be a while, man.
Absolutely. And we've been waiting a while, but we'll discuss more of what we think about the franchise in the future on our rankings video next. So, what we'll do now is we will grade this movie as we do with all our films. Jeff, 4 cardinal rules. Let's hear it.
Let's do it, man. What we always do. 4 cardinal rules. Rule number 1: don't show me the monster. Yeah, you nailed this one. Just like New Nightmare, you have this reinvented Freddy. I want to get a good look at him. I want to observe more of him, but you never give me that chance to. And although that sounds like a bad thing, that's the right thing to do. So yes, I want more of this Freddy. I want more feast for the eyes. You didn't show me the monster. Good job. Rule number 2: be scary at all times, not just when the threat is on screen. Again, broken record here, but Freddy Krueger almost exclusively wins that rule every time. Especially with the introduction of micro naps and the ticking clock that is, if you don't go to sleep, you're going to end up in a coma. Yes, there is always, and a ticking clock doesn't count. A ticking clock doesn't count as being scary at all times. But Freddy is always there. You can become a victim of Freddy when you're studying at the library, as this movie has shown. So, yeah, of course you get this one. Rule number 3: don't over rely on jump scares. You definitely don't get this one. All your scares were jump scares in this movie. There was a shit ton of them. Some of them landed. Some of them got me. Not in a crazy way, but
Correct.
there was a lot of jump scares in this movie, more so than the original. I'm not giving you this one. Push the boundaries. You added some new aspects to the mythos for Freddy. But the only way I'd give you this point is if you did the Freddy was innocent plotline. That is the only way you would have gotten this, or some variation of that. But dude, you didn't push any boundaries for Freddy, so you get 2 out of 4, which means you're in the C range. I gave, I don't remember. I have to look, but I think I'm going to give this one a flat C. I understand the criticisms of it, but I also think that people aren't giving it the justice and the appreciation for the things that it does right, which there are some things it does right. Jackie Earl Haley being the staple of all that. So this movie has a lot of strong aspects to it. It's not the worst Freddy movie by far. It's not the best. I will watch it again. I've watched it 5 times. If I hate a movie, I only watch it 3 times. But I'll watch it again for sure. It falls victim to the times and some of the playing it safe that it does, but there's some things to appreciate here. So right in the middle, they're batting average C.
I'm pretty much right there on the same wavelength as you. Granted, this is the first time I've seen the movie. I do want to go back and watch it again just to maybe pick up on some things I didn't see in that. I don't think it's that bad of a movie. It's certainly not an F like some people say. That's ridiculous. You know, would my opinion change at the time? Maybe if I saw this in theaters in 2010, maybe that's tainted some people's views. I went and saw it in 2010 in the theaters and it sucked. I'm never going to watch it again. I don't know. But for me, you know, this movie does have some really cool elements. I like, you know, some of the things they do with the mythos. They go some different angles, but at the same time, when they go somewhere, they don't fully go for it. They kind of come back and they play it safe, because we all know if you try to please everybody, you'll please no one. And that's what they did. They really didn't please anyone with this movie, because the things they tried to do better than the original, they didn't do, but some of the things that they tried to do new, they didn't fully go there. And so it kind of left you hanging a little bit. I like Jackie Earle Haley as Freddy. I think he did a solid job in this movie, a really good job. You know, some of the acting, not the best. There are some good spots. You know, the angle of going with full on dark Freddy being, you know, committing these acts against children, really makes it a dark and scary Freddy. This is not a funny Freddy by any stretch of the imagination. And I prefer my Freddy to be dark, maybe a little bit more subtle on some of the things that he did and the way he went about things. Maybe just a little bit more, not necessarily comedy, but just a little bit more subtle. I'm right in between like a C- and a C. I'm gonna go C- just because it could go up to a C, it could go higher, maybe it could go low, but right now I'm gonna go with the C-. But I do want to watch this movie again, and I don't have the problems with it that other people have.
Yeah, all very valid points, good points there. God, I'm so glad you didn't just fall right in with the mix of just hating this movie to hate this movie, man. They did that with Godzilla 98. They did that with even the new Halloween. Like, dude, just take it for what it is, and what it is something new, and just have a new opinion of it, man. Don't go into it just comparing it to what is so good it's going to start a franchise. Like, you can't just compare it to the greats right away. Just give it a chance, man.
Correct. So
is it better than Halloween 2007, the reboot?
I'm gonna say no.
Okay, good.
Because I even though there are some things I don't like about Rob Zombie's, I'm always going to be a Michael guy over Freddy guy, regardless. Yeah. But I think while he did do some things that weren't all that great, the things he does right are really good. Like in this movie, they do some things like that could be really good, but they don't go all the way. But the things that Rob Zombie does in the remake that he hits on, he really hits on.
For sure. Okay, fair enough.
But would you put it above I'm just kidding. We're not going to talk about Friday the 13th. We'll leave that when we get to that series. But anyways, thank you guys so much for watching. We appreciate it. If you haven't seen the rest of our reviews, go check them out. Our next video, go check that out as well. There's going to be a ranking of all the films from worst to best and what we think the future of the franchise holds. As usual, thank you for watching Every Horror Film Where Horror is Forever. We'll see you on the next one.
And happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween.
The mummy has now been located.
The living mummy. The living mummy.
Bullets won't stop.
Some creature out of time.
It was horrible. It was horrible.
He's completely out of control.
I saw those bodies.
Is he a man or a monster?
You actually knew a werewolf in a peaceful town where nothing ever happened.
It was horrible. It was horrible.
In the mystical regions of Transylvania.